to unseat a Senate Democratic leader, asking for a democracy. On the one hand, it is impossible. On the other hand, it could be done in about 48 minutes. There is no process to force the Democrats to conduct a new Senate leadership vote, even though by one measure, Chuck Schumer would lose such a vote 37-10, which is what he lost the vote in his own party in his suicidal decision to enable Musk and Trump to proceed unchecked as they rape the government and the laws and the budget and the nation for the next 6 months. Democratic Party rules only mandate leadership elections with the start of each new Congress. The last one was December 3rd. The one before that was December 8th, 2022. The next one would be the 3rd, 8th, or 10th of December, 2026. The only way there would be a new Democratic Party leadership election would be if Schumer resigned or is forced to. On the other hand, if the 36 Democrats and the independent who broke with Schumer in this catastrophe were to simply form their own caucus and elect their own leader, just to pick a name at random, Chris Murphy of Connecticut, Chuck Schumer would be minority leader in name only. The risk of this, of course, is a total fracture of the Democratic Party inside the Senate and out of it, and the prospect of an idiot like Fetterman or an invisible senator like Gillibrand actually caucusing with the Republicans. On the other hand, the only advantage of having 47 non-Trumpists instead of 36 non-Trumpists or 37 non-Trumpists is that you could do things like stop cloture on the 6-month Musk indemnification and continuing resolution bill, except your gutless, spineless, useless, clueless minority leader doesn't do that and instead collaborates with the party of the insane dictator. If he's not going to use 47 votes, what's the difference if he only has 37 votes or if his successor only has 37 votes? Here is the process as I understand it. Create the new Democrats, or Democrats 2.0, or the new Zoo Review, or the new Christie Minstrels. Doesn't matter. Just position them as the actual minority in the Senate. They have the second most votes. Point out to Schumer he is now leader of the third party in the Senate. And if he does not resign as Democratic leader, you will not let him join your new caucus. And you won't let the other losers in either. Senator Murphy, for one, is not leading this revolt. Not anyway at the moment. On NBC yesterday, do you think that Leader Schumer is the best person to lead your caucus in this moment? Senator Murphy, Senator Schumer certainly can lead this caucus. NBC, would you consider that role? Murphy, I don't think anybody's having that conversation right now. Right now? But the American people certainly are having that conversation right now. The Democratic Party certainly is having that conversation right the F now. CNN poll yesterday, Democrats and Democratic-leading independents now say 57 to 42% that Democrats should mainly work to stop the Trump agenda. Not work with the GOP just to get some of their own ideas into legislation. 57 to 42. The NBC poll asks the same question in a different way. Should Democrats stick to their positions, even if that risks sacrificing bipartisan progress? The answer is yes, 65 to 32. 8 years ago, that poll came in no, 59 to 33. It went from 33-59 to 65-32. And these new polls, these landslides, these are before what Schumer did last Friday. God knows how bad these numbers are now. But whatever they are, they actually add up to just one thing. Chuck Schumer is done if the Democratic senators want him done, or if the Democratic Party explains to them that Schumer is done. If they explain this in public, loudly, immediately. Discretion is the better part of valor, or at least fear is the better part of valor. And all day yesterday, I kept waiting to hear that the start of Chuck Schumer's book tour tonight in Baltimore had been postponed or canceled, or he had laryngitis, or they had forgotten to ship the books, or print the books, or write the books. But if Schumer could actually make a career-ending and maybe a democracy-ending decision like he did on the Musk indemnification and continuing resolution bill, why wouldn't he be stupid enough to walk out at the Central Library in Baltimore tonight so he can get booed off the stage? Some people, one day, just run out of smart. Chuck Schumer live tonight in Baltimore. Live at Politics and Prose at 6th and I in D.C. Wednesday night. Live at the Weitzman Museum in D.C. Thursday afternoon. Live at the Moss Theater in Santa Monica Sunday. Or, this event has been unexpectedly canceled. There will be no Chuck Schumer, and there will be no refunds. I hope now, 3 days after they each lit themselves on fire, only to discover it just wasn't enough for insane dictator Trump. I hope soon-to-be former leader one way or the other Schumer and Senators Fetterman and Gillibrand and the others who sold out the democracy and more immediately their colleagues in the House. And I hope the executives at MSNBC who, remember, fired or demoted all the hosts of color, and the executives at CNN who thought they could hold insane dictator Trump at bay, I hope they have all understood where we are, and in particular where they are. Here is where we are. Donald Trump is insane. There is only one path through his insanity towards restoring America as a democracy, as a nation independent of Putin, as a place not to be ashamed of. It is to destroy Trump's presidency. Destroy his presidency. Nothing else will stop him. His last remaining human emotion is vengeance, and nothing you do, no matter how whorish, pandering, obvious, remorseful, no matter how much money or KY jelly-covered praise it contains, will register with him. He wants to destroy you. He wants to destroy the country. But he wants, Schumer, MSNBC, CNN, he wants to destroy you guys first.
And I believe that CNN and MSDNC, who literally write 97.6% bad about me, are political arms of the Democrat Party. And in my opinion, they're really corrupt and they're illegal. What they do is illegal.
So, hey, CNN, how's letting that pimp Scott Jennings take over prime time working out for you? Insane dictator Trump basically told the DOJ Friday afternoon, arrest CNN. Good thing, Tapper and Bash, that you didn't fact-check him in the debate last year. Backstage at the DOJ, Trump probably mentioned the two of you by name. I'd rather have a questioning audience, said CNN's Chris Licht 2.0. He's British. His name is Mark Thompson. At an event on trust in the media on the 1st of this month. I think we should dry our eyes about the loss of traditional trust. Congratulations, Lord Thompson. You have succeeded. Now nobody trusts CNN. Not your former audience, not others in news media, and obviously not Trump and his terrorist cell. Actually, I take that last part back. All of us, Trump included, can trust CNN to do the wrong thing. And as to Schumer, I really wonder if he will be stupid enough to go out in public tonight or on the rest of his tour. Because a man in his position can be that stupid, can convince themselves, they won't protest me, I'm the leader of the party in the Senate. He can convince themselves this is just an extreme version of traditional politics that Trump is enacting and not a slow-motion replay of January 6th, only with the brute force added of law enforcement and bureaucracy. People like Schumer can convince themselves people may be mad at him, or they were mad at him last week, but they're not that mad, and they're certainly not that mad at him this week. Chuck, we are that mad at you. I don't think you should resign as Senate Democratic leader. I think you should resign from the Senate. And Gillibrand with you. This is war. It is a non-shooting war. God help us, maybe only for now. And Schumer is clueless, weak, selfish, arrogant, and worst of all, myopic. To try to finesse his criminally incorrect vote on this, to hide the intention of his vote, to be General George B. McClellan when we need General Ulysses S. Goddamned Grant, and to sell out the House Democrats, it's unforgivable. It is literally unforgivable. There is no path back for Chuck Schumer. Enoch Pratt Central Library, 400 Cathedral Street, Baltimore, Maryland, 7 p.m. Be there. Aloha. And what did Chuck Schumer get out of this? What can be carved on his political tombstone? He ended his career pleasing Trump. Congratulations to Chuck Schumer for doing the right thing. Took, quote, guts, unquote, and courage. The big tax cuts, L.A. fire fix, debt ceiling bill, and so much more is coming. We should all work together on that very dangerous situation. A non-pass would be a country destroyer. Approval will lead us to new heights. Again, really good and smart move by Senator Schumer. This could lead to something big for the USA. A whole new direction and beginning! Exclamation point! Does it worry you at all, Chuck, that 24 hours after that statement, insane dictator Trump's lawyers told a federal court he has an inherent right under Article 2 to deport anybody, immigrant or otherwise, on what he and he alone says are national security grounds? And does it worry you, Chuck, that 12 hours before he praised you for doing the right thing, 12 hours before that, Donald Trump decided you are no longer Jewish?
And Schumer is a Palestinian as far as I'm concerned. You know, he's become a Palestinian. He used to be Jewish. He's not Jewish anymore. He's a Palestinian. Okay.
Yeah, but he's never going to do something like that again. Not as long as he thinks he owns you because you did something he desperately needed you to do. And you were the only one who could do it. And so now he might as well own you. Or, I don't know, deport you. You know what you do when somebody says that about you, Chuck? You ask for a meeting with him, a photo op, and when the cameras are all rolling, then you kick him in the balls and you take the consequences. You don't make a deal with him the next day selling out the people who put you in office. Politico sometimes uses anonymous sources irresponsibly, but I'm not sure that's the case here. They often also look through the wrong end of the telescope, and I'm not sure that's the case here either. Quote, one Democratic senator granted anonymity to share private discussions, said conversations are starting about whether Schumer should be their leader going forward. There's a lot of concern about the failure to have a plan and execute on it, the senator said. It's not like you couldn't figure out that this is what was going to happen. Behind closed doors, even some longtime Schumer allies are raising the specter that his time has passed. Quote, Biden is gone, Pelosi is in the background, Schumer is the last one left from that older generation, said one New York-based donor who is a longtime supporter of the leader. I do worry that the older generation thinks 2024 was just about inflation. But no, the game has changed. It's not left-wing or moderate. It's everyone now saying the game is different now. But he was set up to battle in 2006, and we're a long way from 2006. Or, as the Hollywood writer-director Mike Samanek wrote much more succinctly, I don't want to say the Schumer optics are bad, but Gavin Newsom just invited him on his podcast. There are two other polling notes from those polls yesterday. The CNN one asked Democrats to pick the leader who, quote, best reflects the core values of the party. AOC is at the top at 10%. Kamala at 9%, Bernie at 8%, Hakeem Jeffries at 6%, Jasmine Crockett at 4%. Obama at 4. Oh, yeah, Obama. Remember Obama? I'm sure he'll be dropping a protest playlist any day soon. After he does his hoops bracket. Chuck Schumer? Chuck Schumer is at 2%. No one, the choice no one, is at 30%. AOC has 5 times Schumer's support. No one has 15 times Schumer's support. And Schumer at 2% is tied with Elissa Slotkin. The other poll, Trump's favorability among all voters is already 4 points underwater and 12 underwater on the economy. I mean, how do you F this up in both directions, Chuck? Just as Trump begins to drown on the economy, and just as Elon Musk was retweeting somebody who wrote, Stalin, Mao, and Hitler didn't murder millions of people, their public sector workers did. And even in the White House, Musk was seen to be imploding, and then in response to that imploding, the White House itself managed to implode and attack the racist Musk by going even more racist than him. Musk blithely tells Kudlow, Scotchy, Scotchy, Scotch, on Fox Business about cutting entitlements. In her Red Letter newsletter, Tara Palmieri writes, even though Trump's staffers are terrified of Musk, they know that if you try to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, you die, politically speaking. Quote, it's no longer simmering resistance. People are effing furious, said a source with knowledge of the situation. And then comes the coup de lac of grace. Quote, Medicaid is not just for black people in the ghetto. These are our voters, unquote, said a Republican operative close to the White House. How is that not the quote on the lips of every Democrat in this country today? Medicaid is not just for black people in the ghetto, said a Republican operative close to the White House. These are our voters. How is it not the quote on every Democrat's lip today? 2 words. Chuck Schumer. Or maybe the quote from that little twerp Marco Rubio, who, like Schumer, actually thought he could bargain with Trump and instead wound up having to be the front man for the first assault on freedom of speech and extra-legal extraditions, and now having to expel the duly appointed South African ambassador to the United States because Elon wants to make apartheid great again. Rubio had to call South Africa's Ambassador Rasool, quote, a race-baiting politician who hates America, who is no longer welcome here, because Rasool gave a speech Friday in which he said Trump was, quote, mobilizing white supremacy in the U.S. and abroad as well. So what's your complaint about that, little Marco? Trump is mobilizing white supremacy in the U.S., and so is Musk. And so, Marco, are you complicit little shit. And by the way, a race-baiting politician who hates America and is no longer welcome here? Marco, since that also describes Trump, does this mean you're going to expel Trump? Because somebody is damn well going to have to. Also of interest here, I'm under the weather. So this will be kind of short today, but the worst persons list is the never-ending feast. And as the world collapses and Trump openly ignores the courts and starts deporting people illegally yesterday, guess what the lead story was at Politico? The tone of a D.C. dinner for reporters. The tone, I swear to God. There's nothing fatally wrong with our media political industrial complex. No. That's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Still ahead on Countdown, when I'm sick, I always think of my craziest visit to the doctor ever. I was 21-ish, and the somewhat surprising outcome. So my face stuck to the side of the train, and they had to help me break free from the window. Like that's never happened to you. First, believe it or not, there's still more new idiots to talk about. The daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's other worst persons in the world. Here are the nominees. The bronze, worse, Politico. I know, I praised them earlier. Like Trump, this only lasts 3 to 4 minutes. That's as much time as it's going to buy you. Illegal deportations, U.S. citizens being locked up because they were born somewhere else and were... Told you I was sick. I'm going to leave that in for evidence. Illegal deportations, U.S. citizens being locked up because... No, I really did leave that in. Because they were born somewhere else and were returning to the country. Elon Musk still eluding the much-needed tranquilizing dart. Schumer imploding, and the lead item in Sunday's Politico Playbook newsletter, the Gridiron Dinner, Saturday night in Washington. The Gridiron Dinner. Despite the name, that's a journalism event, and to be fair, Politico is about Washington, and about journalism about Washington, and I know that's not always evident from what they write, especially with the drama constantly surrounding the people who work there, and the new fascist owners from Europe. But do you think just once, you could lead with the, earth-shattering news? Like if Schumer is going to be deposed, or if there are planes full of people who have a legal right to be here, who have been illegally deported by the insane dictator of the United States? Instead of a few words about the effing Gridiron Dinner, 26 paragraphs about the Gridiron Dinner, the first 26 paragraphs of your newsletter. Scrolling, I'll get to the news somewhere. Scrolling, Politico. 26 paragraphs about the Gridiron Dinner and how they didn't toast the president. I will confess I am sufficiently under the weather that when I first read they toasted the president, my mood cheered briefly. Where's the photo of that? Holy crap. I also realized that for a couple of years, I have been mistakenly telling people that it was at the Gridiron Dinner that Dick Cheney, as vice president, made that joke about me that I still love. It wasn't at the Gridiron Dinner. It was at the Radio and TV Correspondents' Dinner. And yes, if it's a Saturday, there is another journalism dinner in D.C. Since you asked, I was going to read the way Adweek covered it, but, the clip is on YouTube, so...
In case you don't know it, Mo's blog is titled Mo Rocca 180, only half as tedious as the regular news. Among his other credits, Mo used to host a TV show called Things I Hate About You. I'm sure I've seen that program. Only I believe it's now called Countdown with Keith Olbermann. Keith's not here tonight to savor my company, but
we roared. I'm Jack Taney, and this is a joke about Keith Olbermann. Anyway, the point of this was the first 26 paragraphs on a dinner like that, about jokes like that, the first 26, not the 6 paragraphs of headlines and then 26 paragraphs about the Gridiron Dinner, but the first 26 paragraphs underscoring this fact. The night they finally kidnap all the reporters off the streets, the last thing every Washington correspondent will file is a piece about what their friends were wearing at the time they were disappeared. The runner-up, worser, Alina Habba, official administration nitwit. I've said it so many times you can say it with me. The future and survival of democracy depends less on our strenuous efforts to preserve it than it does on the stupidity of those who intend to destroy it. That is being tested now But as long as we have the Secretary of Nitwittedness, Alina Habba, I believe we will prevail after we get rid of Schumer. Alina Habba responding to something or another about the attempts to stop human extortion and trafficking, and I don't know if they were claiming, I don't know who they're claiming. The Pope is I don't know who they were claiming that was a trafficker. And Alina Habba writes, "Thank you. Let's pray for the many victims of human extortion as a result of the last administration's neglect and failures." And then the prayer emoji. And this note, this community note, Alina Habba supported the Tate brothers, who are under investigation for human trafficking. There's a reason you go into parking lot law. And that's because it's a challenge to you. I wanted to stretch my mind. It went entirely 1 inch wide. But the winners, the worst, Marco Rubio and Nayib Bukele. As you know, a federal court blocked the illegal deportation of Venezuelans by the insane dictator to a concentration camp in a third-party country, El Salvador. Planes were in the air already, and so the administration decided not to turn the planes around and announced it was not defying the court and announced it was defying the court. Marco Rubio, the little shit, secretary of little shit, boasted about it. And the president of El Salvador, it's just a brand name there. He's not really a president. Like, we don't really have a president. We have an insane dictator. Nayib Bukele, president of El Salvador, screenshotted the headline from the New York Post about the judge blocking Trump from invoking the Alien Enemies Act. And President Bukele added, quote, "Oopsie, too late," and added the crying, laughing emoji. Because somewhere along the line, emoji became fascist. That's President Asshole of El Salvador. Yeah, keep laughing. See you at the World Court at The Hague, buddy, in 2029, unless your own people take care of their problem. 5 years ago, this alleged president wanted approval from the Salvadoran Legislative Assembly for a $109 million loan for his territorial control plan. So to deliver the message, President Bukake, or whatever his name is, sent 40 soldiers over to the Legislative Assembly to say, hello! In 2019, President Bukele introduced that plan, the territorial control plan, to reduce the homicide rate. It was reduced only after, alleged the U.S. Department of State, Bukele negotiated with the gangs in El Salvador to reduce the homicide rate. Hey, do me a solid. Kill fewer people. Okay. And you know who alleged that? Were the State Department under which president alleged he did that? Trump's State Department. But now, Trump's new whore at the State Department, Marco, he's besties with this guy. Marco Rubio and alleged President Bukele of El Salvador. What happened to that guy Duterte from the Philippines again? Oh boy. Today's worst persons, I can't hit this high note, in the world. To the number one story on the countdown and things I promised not to tell. And this is anything but an important career story, but I was reminded of it recently and I laughed like hell, so I thought maybe you should too. I haven't seen all of them in this country, but to my mind, the most underrated of American rivers is the one I grew up along, the Hudson. It gets a bad rap because it's associated with New York City and the deteriorating remnants of the city's once dominant piers, some of which have been unused and rotting for half a century now. But further upstate, literally just past the city line, the Hudson is a magnificent river just to watch, never mind ride on. This is particularly true during a stretch in which the western side of the river is fronted by a series of sheer cliffs called the Palisades, brownish black and striated, carved as the river took shape millions of years ago, but always looking like they had been carefully designed for aesthetic effect. Unfortunately, they are best seen from the commuter railroad that runs along the Hudson into Westchester County, New York. instead of a series of parks or even private palaces. Our forefathers had the presence of mind to build factories and copper processing plants and other nightmares right on the Hudson because of the obvious transportation benefits the Hudson provided. And so the train tracks were laid out next to the river because that made it even easier to get stuff to and from the big city, and damn the views or the ability to appreciate life on the water or the pollution. Still, if you ever find yourself now taking a train from Grand Central Station into the western half of Westchester, get a window seat on the left side of the train, or better yet, when you come back into New York City, sit on the right side, on the river side, and you will get 15 minutes or more of the most magnificent view imaginable out the big windows. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, the Palisades provide the Hudson with a magnificent frame that's almost like a miniature Grand Canyon. I remember thinking of all this that one day early in 1980. I was finally feeling a little better thanks to Dr. Cecilini. Dr. Cecilini had been my physician since I was a boy, and he was the school doctor, and he'd been the town doctor since about 1944. And he always name-dropped other patients I'd never heard of. And as I finished my last growth spurt at the end of my 20th year, I had frequent back pain, no fun at all. And sleeping on the floor helped a little, but not enough. And finally, Cecilini, who had been a hospital doctor during World War II and had seen everything, said, "Hey, just get this prescription filled. Take one of them every day for the next week. It's called a muscle relaxant. This will loosen up your back. It'll lessen the pain a little bit. Just don't operate any heavy machinery." Do you operate heavy machinery when you do those sportscasts of yours, Keith? I had a patient try to run a processor at the copper factory while he took this in 1957. He lost 3 fingers. Leonardo Benvenuti. You know any of the Benvenutis used to live on William Street? I laughed. This was him every time. The Benvenutis on William Street. The Smiths on William Street. The Williams on Smith Street. Anyway, back to the muscle relaxants. I don't think I had ever heard of them before, let alone taken one. I took my barking back to the pharmacy in my hometown of Hastings-on-Hudson, New York. I got the prescription filled. I bought a soda at the pizza parlor across the street, and I ambled down the tiny village's picturesque business district. It's 3 blocks long. Past the statue our old neighbor Jacques Lipschitz donated, and the ultra-modern library, and right into the train station. It was January. It was about 12 degrees. And as I waited for the train to make its 40-minute trip into the city and my job as a sportscaster for the radio network of United Press International, I took the pill. What were they called again? Muscle relaxants that Dr. C had given me and given his other patient, Rico Randazzo. Or was that some guy he mentioned in 1966 to me? I worked the night shift at UPI, so the train was almost always empty, and thus I almost always had my choice of window seats. Midday and midwinter combined to make the sun glisten with extra sparkle off the magnificent Hudson, and the sun's angle was such that the Palisades behind them gleamed brightly as well. And I was thinking about just how gorgeous they were and how underrated the Hudson was. And I felt myself drifting away. I felt 2 hands, one on each shoulder, shaking me violently. "Hey, buddy! Hey, buddy!" I fought to open my eyes and to avoid the bad breath now enveloping my face. As I finally came around, I realized it was the conductor who had just taken my ticket. The train wasn't moving. In fact, only half of the lights were on in the train. The Palisades were long gone. Not the Hudson nor the Palisades, but darkness came in through the windows. I was completely confused. "Come on, shake it off. You got to get out of here. This is as far as we go. Train's going out of service. You don't get off now, you'll be parked under 37th Street for the rest of the day." Through my fog and my haze, I finally began to understand what had happened and where I was. And I began to try to stand when a horrifying awareness overtook me. I could not move the right side of my face. What was worse, I could barely feel the right side of my face. Good God, what had happened to me? Was this like that haunting episode of Alfred Hitchcock where the woman is struggling to wake up and remember the details of the accident out on San Francisco Bay the night before? Only as it finally comes back to her, it turns out the accident had drowned her boyfriend, and the reason it was so difficult to remember was, as she realized only when she got up and saw her reflection in a mirror, that the accident hadn't happened last night, but it had happened in 1905, and she'd been in an insane asylum for half a century. Was that what had happened to me? No, actually. As I discovered when my struggle finally freed my face from the train window to which it had stuck because I had drooled for like 35 consecutive minutes, because I had taken the muscle relaxant, because I had taken it on an empty stomach, because I knew nothing about muscle relaxants, because I was out cold with my mouth open, pressed up against the train window on a 12-degree day, and I had gotten frozen to the glass. Look, it was not quite half a century in an insane asylum, but certainly more embarrassing. It seemed like it took me half a century to pull all of this together. I stood up wobbly. I apologized to the conductor, and I mumbled, back pain, new drug. And as I banked from one side of the doorway to the other and bounced out onto the platform, the conductor shouted after me, "Only take 'em at night, huh?" That little saga. Yeah, Doc, my back is better, but I left half the skin on my right cheek frozen to the 120 from Hastings to Grand Central. He'd probably say, yeah, that happened to another patient of mine, Carlo Lombardo. That reminded me of a much later story from Dr. Cecilini, and I don't want to leave the wrong impression here. Edward Cecilini was a terrific doctor. He practiced into his 90s. He used to tell me to come visit him at his practice in his home on Farragut Parkway anytime I was up from the city visiting my folks. Well, just shoot the breeze. And he'd tell me about something about treating Umberto Flambini in the Army Hospital in 1944. And he'd ask me if I went to school with Marco Bartolini and then say he had to go. He was taking a course over at SUNY Purchase about the latest computer-aided diagnostic tool. The man was 90 years old. He never stopped learning. Great man. And did he howl at the muscle relaxant story? Sorry, I didn't warn you. Oh, well, just take him at night. I had another patient do that in 1917. It was just... All right, anyway, now it's 1995, and I'm working at ESPN, and I'm supposed to fly to Vancouver to do a cameo in an Adam Sandler golf movie, which I suppose was Happy Gilmore. And I didn't want to try to fly to Chicago and then change for Vancouver after going the 2 hours from the middle of Connecticut to JFK. So I came in to my folks' house the day before. I took the folks out to dinner. I stayed over in the spare room to leave from their house to the airport in the morning. And at some point in the middle of the night, I began to have chest pains. Literally, the top of my ribs hurt and my breathing was constricted and I couldn't get back to sleep. And now I'm thinking, I don't know what's wrong, but something is wrong. So I canceled the trip. And I head up to Dr. Cecilini as soon as he's opened up shop, and he's 85 now, and he gives me the big welcome as usual, and I tell him the story, and he says, oh, well, yeah, I think it's nothing to worry about, but we should get this on the record just in case your movie company gets pissy with you about canceling. That happened to another friend of mine, patient, Francesco Lollobrigida. He had a cameo in Moby Dick in 1956. He had to cancel. He wanted to sue him. How about you get your dad just drive you up to the hospital in Dobbs Ferry? I'll meet you there in, like half an hour and a half, something like that. Let me just run a couple of tests on you when we get you up. There's no rush whatsoever. Now he stares off into space for a second. And he looks back at me. He says, I got an idea a little simpler. I have to go there later up to drop off some paperwork on some other guy. Frisco Gaspucci. You know Frisco? Anyway, just give me a second. I'll call him and I'll tell him we're coming up. And you just hop in the car with me. Go out in the waiting room. I'm going to call him about Frisco, and I got to worry about doctor-patient confidentiality. But about Frisco Gaspucci, so, I got to worry about that, so I don't want you listening to this. So now, Ed Cecilini is driving me to Dobbs Ferry Hospital, and I'm thinking about how much he defines the idea of a really dedicated doctor and how every other patient he's ever mentioned to me, I've never heard of one of them. And we get to the hospital, and I don't know, we talked about baseball or my folks or something, and he drives right up to the ER, and we walk in like it's nothing, and he waves to the admitting nurse. Hi, Sheila. How's your son, Sheila? And he points at me, he says, that's the guy. And he says, like it was absolutely the way they do it at every hospital, You can get all his info from him after we run this little check on him, all right? And we go right into the room, and 2 nurses are in there, and they say hi, and one of them tells me to take off my shirt. The other starts shaving places on my chest, and before I know what's happening, I've got electrodes on me, and they're hooking me up to an EKG, and they're drawing blood, and Cecilini reads the start of the EKG printout, and he smiles at me. He says, I'm sorry, I scammed you. But the way you described your chest pains, I thought it was 50-50 you had a heart attack. Last thing I wanted to do is tell you that, just in case you had a heart attack, and then you had another one. That happened to another patient of mine, Bernardo Petrosante. You know Bernardo? Well, let me look at this. You're fine. Let me just wait on the blood gases. Double check that. Go out there and do the paperwork for Sheila at the desk. I think it's just a muscle problem. The son of a gun had not only made sure I didn't know it might be serious, it might be heart attack serious, but he conned me into going to the emergency room without alarming me or even letting me know that was his plan all along. And as I'm brushing the shaved hairs off my chest and putting my shirt on, I say thanks, and then it hits me. Hey, another thing, Doc. Bernardo Pietrasante and Umberto Flambini and all these other patients you've mentioned all these years, they don't really exist, do they? And he says, yeah, you got me about that. I learned a long time ago, make sure your patient never feels like they're the first idiot to have done this to themselves. Come on, I'll give you a lift back to your folks. Might look in and see how your dad's doing if he's got a moment. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Once again, my apologies for the relative brevity. Not feeling that great. But you'd never know it from my performance here today. And you know why that is? Because I'm tough. Also because you can edit out all the bad stuff. Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, the musical directors of Countdown, arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. And still, I'd rather go live. Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards. Mr. Ray was on the guitars, bass, and drums. It was produced by TKO Brothers. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by the best baseball stadium organist ever, Nancy Faust. The sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis and courtesy of ESPN Inc. Other music arranged and performed by No Horns Allowed. My announcer today was my friend Kenny Mayne, who does not appear courtesy of ESPN Inc. Everything else was, as ever, my fault. That's Countdown for today. Just 1,406 days until the scheduled end of his lame duck, lame-brained dictatorship, unless Musk removes him sooner or the actuarial tables do. The next scheduled countdown is Thursday. Again, we'll see. As always, bulletins as the news warrants. Remember, impeach Trump. Impeach Trump? Won't work now, but it will win the Democrats the midterms. If there are midterms, and there is the easy way to get rid of Schumer, you 36 Democrats and Bernie Sanders, just create the new Christie Minstrels Party. Till next time, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.